Hey, Julia, welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you today?
I am doing well. I'm excited to have you on. I know we met at I never pronounce it right, Reuters, I believe.
That's how I say it. So we're both wrong together, if that's
Yeah.
not it.
I think it was like I called it Reuters for my early 20s and then it became Reuters one day. But we met at a conference a few weeks ago and it was great to chat a little bit. And then I'm happy to now bring that conversation online. You are, an expert in the mid-size marketing world. You've got this book, Mid-size, the truths and strategies of marketing in mid-size firms. I want to talk a little bit about that, particularly as companies grow, right? And they have this windfall of revenue or they're really hitting their stride. One of the things I see, and I'm sure it's not unique, is that as a company grows, it needs systems, it needs layers of management, it needs to professionalize to some extent, particularly with its marketing ops. Now, how, in your experience, or what are maybe some of the pitfalls you could help the listener avoid when it comes to increasing that team size, but then also maintaining the innovation speed, that marketing spirit without getting bogged down in the 27 layers of legal approval?
It's so important to think about this because the people who came and started this organization that now has this flywheel going, they have a certain culture and an appreciation for the nimbleness and the scrappiness. So those are your mid-sizers. And what you want to make sure happens is that they don't start to get frustrated when all of a sudden their growth comes and then it's almost like collecting barnacles on the boat. So there's a couple things that, because I've observed the same thing that you've just mentioned. The first one I think is staying really focused on the most important goals. Sometimes when you start to get bigger, then it's, well, now that we have more people, we can also chase this rabbit. And staying laser focused on the most important things that need to happen that year or that 3 years, and keep pulling people back to, yeah, but is it going to drive whatever you're looking for? Enrollment, e-commerce, being just, I don't know, ruthless about, hey, that's a great idea, but it has nothing to do with the core of our business, helps keep, I keep doing this hand motion, like to the center, push to the center so you go faster, further. The other one is recognizing the fact that, okay, we're bigger now. And this happens in certain positions. And I'm going to point to CEOs and chiefs and organizations that have them. When you were smaller, you used to be able to do a lot more of your functional stuff. As you grow, you got to let it go. There's no way that the CMO, as much as I love writing, when I start reworking the press release, something is wrong. And I'm guilty, but you have to like push it down to the people. As you bring on more people, you got to look for these legacy kind of pinch points and get rid of them. And it's hard because the people who see those pinch points are generally the worker team. And someone's got to figure out who's going to go tell the CMO to knock it off, or who's going to tell the CEO, like, really, you've got to stop. All these decisions cannot run through you.
Yeah, I want to jump in for a second because you said something that is actually really important and not really spoken about a lot. And I say it because of the Apple spot that just went live with they were crushing all the instruments and they ended up apologizing. And you said something there about who's going to go talk to the CMO and creating or ways that companies, and we have a lot of CMOs who listen to this who probably think like, yeah, my place, it's a place of open feedback. It's an open door policy, but in reality, it's not. So I want to just double down on this a little bit or get your thoughts on, okay, how do you systematize or actually create a place where the people who maybe are a little more junior or who are in the trenches, so to speak, working, the day-to-day, creating the content, doing all that. How do we make sure they have a legitimate voice that can help protect us as executives, protect us from our blind spots? Is there anything you've done there?
I think one is training teams on how to give feedback. It's really hard for most bosses to hear junior people saying, you're doing this wrong. Even training more junior people how to say things like, hey, I'm noticing for our workflow, we're having a reoccurring consistent problem. Making the language about the workflow versus about the people, just training people how to do that. And then in a meeting, it could be, I'm joking, you can make fun of myself as the CMO, but even if it's a VP of this or that, there can be a conversation like, this keeps getting hung up. Could we push the approvals down a level? Can Nancy just approve it because she seems to have a good handle on it. So I think one of the things that we're trying to do is figure out how to teach people language. It feels like a cop out to blame things on COVID, but we took a big powder from talking to each other on the daily and teaching people how to interact with groups. So that makes it a little bit like a new topic. Hey, I hear what you're saying and it's true. Try expressing it this way at this group meeting. So I think that helps with this growth curve that you're talking about. There's new challenges, there's new kind of pinch points that will appear. How do you talk about them as the work and the outcome of growth versus making it ever feel personal?
Yeah. And speaking of the personal, I love that and building that language. And you're right, COVID restricted our interactions with teams, or really created a new environment where it's time bound and transactional. Okay, we're up on the hour. Goodbye, everybody. And there's none of that walking out of the hall, immediate feedback to be like, hey, did I say that right? Did I oh, can I grab you for a second? There's none of that. So I definitely agree that we're navigating that. Now, in terms of the personal, in companies, particularly what I've seen with midsize, is if the founder is still on board. The founder started this with a dream and the usual story. Hey, I built this technology, or I built this product, I raised a little money, and oh my goodness, it took off. But a lot of times that founder is great at building a team to, 50 people, and they're not really fantastic at managing 500,000. How do you approach managing what I'll call like ego driven marketing initiatives, where a founder will come in, or an executive, it could be an executive, comes in one day and goes, we're sponsoring an NFL team. And it's like they were at a dinner the night before where his friend is doing it, and they come in and it's totally off base. But managing the ego of, I would say, the other executives sometimes who come in, particularly the CEO or founder, when they come in with for lack of a better term, like a giant ego marketing play.
Well, as we all probably know, and sometimes you can't. And sometimes, all right, everyone, NFL, get your 3/4 pullover. We're wearing them. But this is a day and age where data drives so much more, and also choices. And I think it's helpful to say, great, we can do that. Give me a day to come and show you like what will change in the budget. Because, especially if you're in a mid-sized company, it's a this or that. Your pie is your pie. So I think that the art there is, one, first of all, be open, because even though it sounds ego driven, sometimes these crazy ideas are actually good ideas. So I try to remind myself, like, don't bat it down too far because I think it was hatched over 2 martinis. Instead, listen for like what part of it is super appealing, and then say, oh, okay, let me think this through. Let me take it back to the team. Let me like bring you what we think it's going to cost and what we would cut back in order to do that. And then sometimes a day or two passes, and then the leader who is really inspired gets this. And if you're on the C-suite, you have other folks around the table, like your CFO, sometimes your COO, and it gives them a chance to also weigh in. Yeah, I think my advice on that is, even when it sounds like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me, keep listening. Sometimes these wacky ideas are the ones you're like, oh my God, that was a game changer for us. But then there's always a cost. Talk about the cost and the trade-off so that everybody's comfortable with like, okay, so if we're doing this, that whole, West Coast expansion or whatever it is on ice for another year.
Yeah, it's that okay, if we're going to take this moonshot, we need to also account for gravity in our calculations. And let's look at the budget. Not only, hey, what's going to get cut financially, what's going to happen to our internal resources? Okay, that campaign that we were going to do a national brand rollout. Well, now that person's got to direct the NFL team sponsorship, and that's their new job, is making sure that the, Denver Broncos are happy with the rollout.
I have a great example. When I was the CMO for the American Lung Association, and this was during COVID, and some of our income came from these, in-person events, these big stair climbs, and all of that stuff got shut down. So we were thinking that we could do one of these big shows and make it like a fundraising virtual gala. Our timing was we weren't one of the first ones, so it wasn't getting like new news. It wasn't yet polished yet. So we were going to hire Queen Latifah and her production company, and she was going to get the talent, and we were going to go for it. So this was like our moonshot, the big idea. It wasn't on the radar, but we were like, all right, do we have a lot to lose? We took it to the board because this is really outside of what we're doing. And our CEO, a guy named Harold Wimmer, great great guy, great leader. He's like, these are valuable stakeholders. Let's talk to them. And they asked great questions. They were like, well, let's look at our financial position. And like, we've never been in a better financial position to do this. What else could happen positive? What else could happen negatively? It was so great to have the board say, okay, COVID's a lung disease. We need money to keep getting the word out about what everybody needs to do for public health. Let's do it. Much more comforting when you have all of your stakeholders on board with something.
Yeah, that's huge. I like that. Just getting back to like the business 101 of like, let's do a SWOT analysis on this and then let's make a decision. We're all smart enough to figure this out and let's literally whiteboard it. And then, okay, we're in a position to do this, let's green light it. Maybe it doesn't work, but this is marketing, right? So I love that.
It was a great example of a project where some of it worked out better than we could have imagined and some of it didn't. And we learned so much as an organization, like, oh, well, this is how this type of a gala or this type of virtual event, this is how it works. And you do these three things to win in the marketplace. And these three things we will never do again.
I like it. Shifting gears a little bit, I want to talk about brand, right? And I feel like brand is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but is not. The definitions are as vague as I think in the ways that it's used. So, in particular, in your book, oh, I forget, it's Coulter. I forget his first name.
Kotler, Philip Kotler.
Yeah, and he quoted and he said, a brand is a company's promise to deliver a specific benefit to address a particular need of its customers. I guess one, with social media being here and things moving so quickly, how do you view balancing the speed of the internet and how quick things can be into faux pas in 27 minutes and making sure that your brand somewhat stays in the right cultural zeitgeist? That we are able to actually maintain, because we can say it's this and have these internal capabilities, but if the internet and everyone is freaking out about something else, how do you weigh or balance that push pull to be in the internet discourse that's going on daily with also, hey, this is our core brand and what we're actually about, and not getting distracted, so to speak?
I think knowing your brand, knowing your brand's voice, knowing how your brand can show up and how it shouldn't show up is so important. And it should be written, it should be taught, it should be in training, it should be part of onboarding for anybody joining, even the accountants joining your organization. It should be part of the onboarding. For the marketing, social media, anyone in the digital communication, you got to double down there. There are some parts of communication that move super fast. And then there's some parts that don't. So I think really looking even at like, how would you show up? Being a consistent promise to people who have a certain need. Like, I have to hand it to Kotler. That's deep stuff. But it's also the promise of consistency. Like for me, when I'm going to an area where I know nothing about, if I can find a Marriott or a Hilton, I have a consistency promise from that brand. So it takes out some ambiguity. One of the things on the internet right now is there's so many, I'll pick on clothing and apparel for right now. In my Instagram feed, I'm always seeing these really cute outfits that I can get for unbelievably cheap prices from, I'm not even going to call them brands. I'm just going to call them names I have never heard before. So like many, I have tried this out and it gets here and like, oh, this is crap. I just wasted my money. And there's no sense in trying to return it because it's too difficult, but it's a lesson learned. So for me, I look at even purchases like that. Like, okay, if I purchase something from a brand that I know, it takes away a lot of ambiguity. So I think those underpinnings of branding help. And then when you elevate that conversation even one further, almost everybody will pay a premium for a brand that they think deserves it. So I could get a puffer coat or I can get a Patagonia coat. I will pay more for a Patagonia coat because I know the quality, but I also really believe in what they believe in and their efforts towards keeping the earth as their number one shareholder. Those are very precious commodities for brands that have been true to what they stand for, and people know what the brand stands for. You're asking about how does a brand mix it up in social media, which is probably like the toughest test, right?
Yeah, it's the way I look at it, right? We are a social media agency and we work and we have to burst a lot of bubbles sometimes because people want to do the fun, fast stuff. And I'm like, okay, the product has to match the promise. Like our internal capabilities, what your company can execute on has to match the external view of the product. And if we start doing dance things, but we're selling accounting software, like this isn't, it might, I'm very big on like diet impressions. Like you get diet impressions. There's no calories to them. And you think, oh, look, we got all this engagement, we got all these things. And I'm like, yeah, but this is how, and it kind of parlays into my next question, which is, and something I'm very, very passionate about. And listeners of this show are probably like, okay, George, we heard it, but I'm very passionate about marketers not being seen as the arts and crafts department. And I think sometimes chasing trends and doing things that are fun but really aren't aligned with the product promise is like a quick way to be seen as a cost center, particularly in digital. And then we're the first to, the CEOs will say sayonara to us first if we're not tied to something on the P&L. So all of that, I want to ask you what tips maybe you could give somebody on the brand side, on digital side, who is maybe feeling the heat. Maybe the company had a down quarter and they feel like they're not being treated seriously within the org, or like they are, the arts and crafts department where sales is mad at them and operations and product and everybody else thinks like we're doing all the work here and marketers, they're doing dances around the office. How or what coaching would you give to that team?
Well, I'm going to kind of break this into two different topics. And I think one topic is using marketing as a strategic partner within the enterprise, and one that's a department that's truly responsible for revenue and growth and not just the arts and crafts. So if they're involved upfront, so I want to get back to that. The other one is really about, I'm going to go tactical first with social media. So other than the marketing department, there's probably a lot of confusion about how social media really works. I still hear people tell me like, you know what, well, let's just make some viral videos. I'm like, like I'm on that. I'm on the viral video business. But even talking to internally, my partners to say we have two kinds of social media. We have paid social, and then we have our organic social. In my world, I think organic social has to be on brand, but that's where you talk about what your customers want to talk about. That's where I think it's okay to kind of chase trends a little bit as far as your brand bandwidth will go. And, an example, many months ago, before we were tired of the Taylor Swift and Kelsey couple, at Build-A-Bear, we dressed up because we have the NFL license. We dressed up one bear as Kelsey, and we dressed up the bunny as Taylor Swift. And we said, now this is a couple we can get behind. So we can do some fun things like that. It's showing our product, it's within our brand reach, but it's going along with what we see our customers talking about in social. There's no money behind that. There's just a little brand love. It's like, and then you can see like, okay, we had so much engagement around that. And then there's social media, especially paid social, where if I'm going to put money behind it, actually, I need something to happen. It's going to be a little bit more serious. It's going to have a call to action. It is also going to be planned. So I'm going to know months ahead that Mother's Day is coming and graduation and whatever. I'm going to have content planned with CTAs and landing pages and conversion planning. That is very specific. A little bit more room to breathe and play and like be reactive to where your customer base is going. And again, this is going to be different for a B2B. Like, if you're selling accounting software, I don't know how playful you get in your organic, but it doesn't have to be playful. It could be trust conversations or just things that are kind of going on in the accountant's zeitgeist. And that's where I think you can kind of divvy up, hey, this is a little bit more what the customer wants to hear focus. And this side, the paid side, is what we want them to know about and want them to convert on piece.
Yeah, no, I like that. It's a balancing act. And I like this, we're planning out, okay, what are our paid media campaigns? Like you said, they have to be, a lot of times we're driving clicks or driving conversions. Ultimately, we hope, both. And how does this tie in with our organic plan? And my thoughts on like trend chasing and everything, I'm like, great, we can chase trends if they match up with our champion SKU, if they match with a predefined company value, or if it leans into a competitor differentiator that we have. So like, okay, Burger King, Fire is better. Their whole thing, flame broiled, they're doing everything fire is better. Okay, are there opportunities where other things are better when they're done over fire, or what can they do if there was a trend along that? Okay, I'm with it now, right? We're going through a process with the company now, and they're putting their customers in a good mood is kind of one of their things. And I'm like, oh, if we hired somebody at the front of the store to give compliments to people as they walked in and filmed it, okay, this aligns with the brand. Even though it's a restaurant and that video in a vacuum doesn't align, the value of that I'm with. So with all of that, I'm trying to find like, okay, do we have these values? Or you were able to put the champion skew, right? The bear into the Kansas City conversation. Okay, cool. I like it. So I try to run things through those lenses. Obviously, there's other ways to do it, but I see a lot of brands, for lack of a better term, getting completely out of pocket when it comes to.
Well, and we haven't even touched on kind of like the new addition to this social conversation, which is influencers and creators. And then we'll even go, take it to UGC also. So with creators and the influencers, you at least can provide them with a brief. And then from there, it goes where it goes. With UGC, it goes where it goes. I mean, by definition. But this is where things start to blur because, I used to have these two nice, neat swim lanes. Organic, we control it. Paid, we control it. And we make sure it converts to one of our most important KPIs. Now we have this in-between spot that is fantastic, actually, because if you have a creator making things, if there is a video that's hitting really well organically, you just whitelist it. And then all of a sudden it moves from this lane to the other lane, and it now becomes paid social. So I love this fluidity between what is PR, what is organic social media, versus with a pixel, it can go into the other lane and now it is paid and you're watching it convert. I love that there's this kind of new lane right up the middle of these two, which blur everybody's lines.
Yeah, it is interesting when you do have a video like that, like you're saying, or a creator who really just aligns with the brand. This is something that's interesting too for those listening. I'll have to find the exact figure. I'll link it in the show notes. But basically, the study highlighted that if a creator or influencer is believable that they would actually use that product, the brand recall, it's something like 50% greater and sales are greater. But if it's just insert celebrity, insert product, and it's not an obvious match, people are going to forget it. And I've been so angry at this one campaign right now, which is Lionel Messi for Michelob Ultra beer, because every time I see it, I'm like, Lionel Messi's not drinking beer. Like the greatest soccer player in the world is not drinking beer. Like I just can't buy it for a second. And then I walk away, I'm like, I get it's like insert celebrity, insert thing, but I'm like, this one campaign is driving me nuts because, and then I started, once I read that stat, I started seeing it everywhere where I see, oh, there are celebrities that have better alignment, where you see Kevin Hart has a big initiative right now around financial literacy, particularly with the Black community. I love it because his first stand-up was all about, oh, I don't have money in my checkings to my savings. And it becomes such a tie back to some of the stuff he stands for. And a guy who was on the show, actually, Mikhail, brought that to my attention. I was like, oh, he's perfect with that. So I think all of that with creators and influencers, making sure if you're listening that, hey, they do align and would actually use your product. You're not the 10th product they've posted about that week,
And it's funny because you can see every so often there'll be a celebrity or a celebrity couple, and they are just like pushing like product after product after product. I'm like, are they trying to buy like a new home in Malibu? Is this kind of like if we just do 7? And it makes them less believable for any product. But what I think has been really interesting is the rise of, you can call them nano or micro influencers who can really have an outsized presence on a product because of that authenticity. And I know everyone's tired of hearing about authenticity, this and that, but I think that is what appeals to people. They can see themselves like, oh, well, she's using it and she likes it, or she's having fun with it for this and this reason. And it just seems so much more believable than even a celebrity in a celebrity life that doesn't look like my own. I just think that there's this new openness that didn't used to exist to getting information you'd act on from people who are just people.
Yep. And one of the examples I've seen in my day-to-day, for instance, is, and this is kind of breaking impressions versus real influence. So there's a run club I'm part of here. The founder of it is a physician for a college football team here. He runs the run club. Under Armour sponsors the run club. he is sponsored by Under Armour. So we have UCLA's team doctor sponsored by Under Armour running a run club. Now, everyone in that run club has started to suddenly wear a lot more Under Armour. And I'm like, and there's no push. It's not being pushed on anybody. It's not anything. But I'm like, I'm sitting there with my marketing brain being like, oh, this guy actually has influence. We're talking about an expert in sports medicine. If it's good enough for him and I see him wearing it, oh, I'm going to wear that, because that's real. Like, there's real credibility in behind that sponsorship. Although it's never going to be on any Super Bowl halftime commercials. Doing that across the country, product seeding actual people of influence in actual groups, it's like you can really, really start to drive impact there.
Well, when I was the CMO at Sylvan Learning, and Sylvan Learning is a national tutoring company, and we were launching some really new products, and they're STEM products and robotics and just some really cool classes that weren't the traditional tutoring, but it's great ways to do like group work in STEM. So we tapped Bill Nye, the science guy, to be our spokesperson. Now, he's not like a mega star, but people know his name and they know what he stands for. And when he was doing videos and doing social for us, it was so believable. We didn't have to do a lot for people to go, oh yeah, because one of our marketing challenges was not to be viewed only as remedial tutoring services, but to be viewed as an education company. Having his voice in that mix was instrumental in the success.
It makes so much sense too if you think about the cohort there of parents that grew up watching Senor Nye. It makes sense. Julia, this has been awesome. Before I let you go, I do want you to, one, let us know where people can find your book, two, connect with you, and then three, I know you have an exciting series that you dropped on LinkedIn on your newsletter. So yeah, the floor is yours.
So kind of going back to MIDSIZE, we've talked about MIDSIZE a lot. I've worked at both like mega companies, and I've also worked at at MIDSIZE. And got it here. MIDSIZE is kind of my jam. I like working in MIDSIZE companies because you can really be cross-functional, collaborative, and have an oversized impact on the outcome of your business. And I just like that. As I wrote this book, it's starting to attract people who want to have this conversation. So I started a newsletter, which is kind of an output of an op-ed I did on Ad Age. And I guess my hypothesis is that we need better ways to connect agencies with mid-size firms. Because when most of us go, when we read Ad Age every morning, the folks that you're hearing about are these big agencies who have great press-worthy creative. I can't afford those. So what I've been looking for is a way to connect some of these smaller agencies who are great partners for mid-sized firms. So I've started my experiment. Follow me on LinkedIn, and I'm dropping mid-size matchup. I think just 20 minutes ago, I launched the 5th one, and you can subscribe to the newsletter, or you can just like read the article. Hopefully it gives you an appreciation for talent that's out there that's perfect for mid-size companies. And then the book Mid-Size itself is on Amazon. So if you just go on Amazon and find Mid-Size by Julia Fitzgerald, I hope you like it.
Amazing. And I will put links to all those. I got my copy right here. So make sure y'all go down, click it, grab the book. It's a great read. Julia, thanks again for coming on today.
It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. That's it for this episode. As always, I'm your host, Jordan Shelton, and I'll catch you next time.